Bobby Clarke scores!
Second center ice. Harlamov passes back. Harlamov pass. A penalty, I believe, on this one.
That was the message that every guy in the National Hockey League knew. Watch out for Clarke. He'll do anything to win.
People always thought, oh, he's too small, he can't play. I was 5'6", 130 pounds. And my coach at the time, who was a huge influence on my career, his name was Gene Poplio. So he says, you should watch Bobby Clarke play hockey. Because in those days, the centerman was a big centerman in front of the net, but Bobby Clarke was this little guy that sort of played in the corner, and that was his game. And I would go down to Maple Leaf Gardens, I'd pay $1 and get standing room, and I watched the warm-up, I watched the game, I watched him play every game on TV, I studied him inside and out. And I became a little Bobby Clarke. I mean, if it wasn't for Bobby Clarke, I probably would never have made the NHL.
They created something special in Philadelphia, and Clarke was the ringleader in so many ways.
But it all was brought together by Bob Clarke. Bobby Clarke was our captain. He sacrificed himself for the team in every single way you can imagine.
Clarke, he never quit on any play. The team rallied around that. He always came up big with plays. He would do anything to win.
Barber circle near side to McLeish, in front to Leach, Leach to Clarke, Clarke to Leach, score! Great play!
Do you dare face a man willing to shatter your ankle just to win a game? Welcome to the story of Bobby Clarke, the greatest villain the NHL ever produced, the heart and soul of the Philadelphia Flyers, a team so ruthless that the entire league called them the Broad Street Bullies. That gap-toothed grin lifting the Stanley Cup, radiant yet deeply unsettling. Hall of Fame goaltender Ken Dryden said it best. In the 1970s, only 2 players could completely change the outcome of a game just by stepping on the ice. Bobby Orr with his skill, and Bobby Clarke with his iron will. So just how terrifying was that iron will? 4 stories will tell you everything. It was September 1972. And the fate of an entire nation was hanging by a thread. The Summit Series, 8 games between Canada and the Soviet Union, had turned into a nightmare for the Canadian side. Heading into Game 6 in Moscow, Canada was on the verge of elimination, and standing between them and disaster was one man, Valery Kharlamov, the Soviet Union's most electrifying player, a forward so gifted he could dismantle an entire defensive unit with a single burst of speed. No Canadian defender could stop him legally, so Canada decided to stop him illegally. Assistant coach John Ferguson pulled Bobby Clarke aside on the bench. The message was short and without apology. Kharlamov needed a slash to the ankle. Clarke did not hesitate. He waited for his moment, and when Kharlamov glided across the ice, Clarke swung his stick with both hands like a man chopping wood, a full, deliberate slash directly into Kharlamov's ankle, fracturing the bone. Kharlamov tried to play through the pain that game, but he was a ghost of himself. He missed Game 7 entirely and was severely limited in Game 8. Canada won all 3 remaining games and completed one of the most dramatic comebacks in hockey history. Ferguson later admitted everything.
And I asked Bobby, I said, Bobby, try to tap that ankle of his and break it. And we'll slow him down.
Kharlamov himself never hid what happened. He said, Bobby Clarke was sent to take me out of the game. It was premeditated. Canada won the series. Kharlamov's career was never the same, and Bobby Clarke simply skated away, smiling. If the slash on Kharlamov showed the world what Bobby Clarke was willing to do to an opponent, the 1974 Stanley Cup Final showed what he could do to the greatest player who ever lived. Bobby Orr was not just the best player in the NHL at that time. He was widely considered the best player in the history of the game. His skating, his vision, his offensive instinct from the defense position, everything about him was otherworldly. When the Boston Bruins met the Philadelphia Flyers in the Stanley Cup Final, almost no one gave Clarke and his teammates a serious chance. Head coach Fred Shiro had a different idea. He assigned Clarke one mission: make Orr's night a living nightmare. Clarke executed the assignment with surgical precision. He shadowed Orr everywhere on the ice, delivering physical contact at every opportunity, deliberately targeting Orr's surgically repaired knees to grind him down over 60 minutes. It was not just physical. Clarke got inside Orr's head, provoking him, irritating him, wearing down his composure shift by shift. It worked. Orr, a player almost never drawn into confrontations, finally snapped and dropped his gloves against Clarke. Both captains were sent to the penalty box at the same moment. Orr sat there furious, jaw tight, staring at the ice. Clarke sat across from him, gap-toothed grin wide open, completely unbothered. Orr later reflected on that experience. He didn't just play hockey. He attacked your self-control. He made you play his game, an ugly, exhausting game. Moments after both men returned to the ice, Rick McLeish scored the only goal of the game on the power play. The Flyers won the Stanley Cup. Clarke, that series, won 48 of 66 faceoffs against Phil Esposito, one of the most dominant centers in the league, effectively controlling the tempo of the entire final. His individual numbers told the same story of total dominance. He won the Hart Trophy, the NHL's most valuable player award, 3 times, in 1973, 1975, and 1976. In 1975, he claimed the award despite scoring fewer points than Bobby Orr, 116 against Orr's 135, because voters recognized that his defensive impact and his effect on team morale were simply impossible to replace. Over his career, Clarke recorded 1,210 points across 1,144 games. He was the first player from an expansion team to score 100 points in a single season. And in the 1974 to 1975 season, his plus-minus rating reached plus 79, just 1 point behind Orr's plus 80, the best in the entire league. Punch Imlach, general manager of the Buffalo Sabres, put it plainly in 1975. If you want to fill the building, get Gilbert-Perreault. But if you want to win, get Clarke. There is no other discussion. Every story about Bobby Clarke's toughness on the ice becomes even more extraordinary when you understand what he was fighting off it. Clarke was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes at the age of 13. In the 1960s, that diagnosis was effectively a death sentence for any dream of professional sports. The body could not regulate its own blood sugar. Energy could collapse without warning. The risk of a medical emergency during physical exertion was real and constant. NHL teams knew this. Detroit and Montreal passed on Clarke in the first round of the 1969 NHL draft, convinced he would not survive the physical demands of professional hockey. Several other teams followed the same logic. One scout from the Philadelphia Flyers did not. Jerry Melnick pushed the organization to take a chance on Clarke in the second round. He later said, "I had to beg management to pick him. I knew his body had issues, but I had never seen anyone with a heart that big on the ice." What Clarke did to manage his condition was remarkable by any standard. Every day, he sterilized his insulin needles by boiling them. Disposable syringes were not yet widely available. During games, he drank Coca-Cola mixed with extra sugar between periods to keep his blood glucose at a level that allowed him to compete. He never used his condition as an explanation for a poor performance. He never asked for sympathy. Clarke himself said it directly. "I never thought of myself as a diabetic player. I was a hockey player who happened to have diabetes. If you use illness as an excuse for a bad game, you have already lost." Decades later, Max Domi, an NHL player who also lives with type 1 diabetes, named Clarke as his greatest inspiration. He proved that this disease cannot define the limits of what you are capable of. if you are tough enough. Clarke played 15 seasons in the NHL. His pancreas never once stopped him. Bobby Clarke retired from playing in 1984. The ice was behind him. Most people assumed the most frightening chapter of his story was over. They were wrong. Clarke moved into the front office and became general manager of the Philadelphia Flyers. The same instincts that made him dangerous on the ice, the refusal to show weakness, the demand for absolute toughness, the belief that winning justified almost any decision, followed him directly into the boardroom. The clearest example came in 1999, during an away game in Nashville. Eric Lindros, the franchise's biggest star and highest-paid player, collapsed with a collapsed lung. The Flyers' medical staff, operating under Clarke's leadership, initially planned to put Lindros on a flight back to Philadelphia immediately, despite his critical condition. It was teammate Keith Jones who found Lindros turning blue in the bathroom and rushed him to emergency care in time to save his life. Rather than acknowledge the organization's failure, Clarke publicly questioned Lindros' courage when the player later complained that the team's medical staff had repeatedly misdiagnosed his brain injuries. Clarke stripped him of the captaincy. Carl Lindros, Eric's father, did not hold back. Clarke and the medical staff almost killed my son. They wanted him on a plane with a bleeding lung. That is an unacceptable level of cruelty. Sports journalist Jay Greenberg wrote, "Clarke never placed anything above the Flyers. Not compassion, not a superstar the organization had invested millions of dollars building around." So what do you think about Bobby Clarke? A hero? A villain? Or something in between? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like and subscribe to the channel for more stories like this one. Thank you so much for watching.